At 23:40 hours on December 29, 1944, Major Carroll C. Smith sat shrouded in the blacked-out cockpit of his P-61B Black Widow at Muroc Field, Luzon. The only light came from the soft glow of his instruments. Outside, the Philippine night was absolute, a void hiding a deadly calculus. For 2 weeks, Japanese bombers had come every single night. 334 air raid alerts. Their target? The half-built airfields that were key to the upcoming Lingayen Gulf invasion. If those runways were destroyed, the invasion would be delayed, costing thousands of American lives. Smith, 26 years old, with 43 combat missions, was the newly arrived Guardian. His squadron, the 418th Night Fighter Squadron, was the only thing standing between the bombers and 20,000 vulnerable troops sleeping below. The pressure was a physical weight. Behind him, in a separate compartment, radar operator Lieutenant Philip Porter stared into the greenish haze of his SCR-720 radar scope. His voice crackled over the intercom. Multiple contacts, bearing 035, 12 bandits, speed 180 knots. The math was brutal. 1 P-61 against 12 bombers. Even if Smith shot down 3, 9 would get through. His training at Orlando Army Airfield had prepared him for night intercepts, but not for this tactical nightmare. The Black Widow was America's secret weapon, the first plane designed from scratch for night combat. Its radar could see in the dark, but it couldn't multiply one aircraft into 12. Smith pushed the twin throttles forward. The Pratt & Whitney engines roared. They had to try. The first of the 12 was now on Porter's scope, a glowing blip of death moving inexorably toward the unsuspecting base. The P-61 climbed into the ink-black sky. Smith saw nothing through the canopy. No moon, no stars, no horizon. He flew by instruments alone, guided only by Porter's calm vector corrections. The Japanese Betty bomber flew on, confident in their invisibility. They had no tail warning radar, no concept that an American fighter could hunt them in total darkness. Smith's world narrowed to his own small radar display and Porter's voice. Range 2 miles, slightly high, come left 2 degrees. The blip grew. At 500 yards, Smith finally saw it. A faint silhouette against the clouds, the dim cherry glow of exhausts. He maneuvered below and behind, the Black Widow's dark paint making it a phantom. The bomber flew straight, unaware. Smith's finger rested on the trigger of his 4 20mm cannons. One short burst was all doctrine allowed. He had to conserve ammunition for the other 11 targets. He centered the Betty in his illuminated gun sight and fired. The violent roar of the cannons shattered the night. Tracers streaked out, and instantly the bomber's right wing erupted in a fireball. The Betty cartwheeled into the sea north of Muroc at 23:57 hours. 1 down. But as Smith banked away, Porter's voice was urgent. 3 more contacts, different vectors. They're closer to the base. Smith checked his fuel gauge. He'd already burned 15%. The night's true cost was just beginning. To stop the others, he would have to defy not just the enemy, but the cold laws of physics and endurance. The victory was empty. As the flaming debris of the first Betty faded into the sea, Major Smith's mind was already on the next blip on Lieutenant Porter's scope. The clock read 23:58. 11 bombers remained, and the relentless arithmetic of the night took over. Fuel was now at 85%. Every interception was a race against consumption. Porter's voice, steady but tense, cut through the intercom. Second contact, bearing 180, altitude 6,000, range 6 miles. Smith banked the heavy Black Widow south, its twin booms slicing through the black air. The new target was 23 miles away, nearly 5 minutes of flying time the bomber would use to close in on Muroc. Smith pushed the throttles further, feeling the P-61 surge to 320 miles per hour. The powerful R-2800 engines drank fuel greedily at this setting, but speed was the only currency that could buy the distance he needed. Smith was no rookie. He was a veteran of 43 missions over the Pacific. Yet this was different. Night fighting was a duel of ghosts, fought in a realm without sight. His life depended entirely on the man behind him. Porter, hunched over his scope, was more than an operator. He was Smith's eyes. In the green glow, he didn't just see blips. He read their stories, their speed, their intent, their slight jinx that hinted at an aware pilot. The second Betty flew lower, at 6,000 feet, skimming the cloud tops. Smith descended, his world again confined to the instruments and Porter's calm vectors. Left 2 degrees, descend at 500 per minute. At 1 mile, the dark shape materialized, a solid patch against the lesser darkness. The bomber crew was oblivious, flying a straight path to their destiny. Smith slid below and behind, the killing position. At 350 yards, his thumb found the trigger. Another shattering 2-second burst. The tracers converged, and the Betty's entire right side blossomed into an orange fireball. It fell from the sky at 0019. 2 down. But as Smith pulled up, avoiding the debris, the cold numbers delivered their verdict. Porter reported 2 more contacts, now even closer to Muroc. Smith's fuel gauge glared back, 42%. They were burning through their margin with every attack. The mission was becoming a trap. Each success pulled them deeper into a sky still thick with enemies. The low-altitude bomber they had bypassed was now a critical threat. Smith had to choose, chase the higher, farther target or dive after the lower, nearer one. His decision would mean life or death for the man on the ground. With a grimace, he shoved the control column forward. "We take the high one first." The Black Widow's nose rose, climbing back into the consuming darkness, its pilots knowing they might have just chosen wrong. Climbing to 9,000 feet consumed precious fuel, but Smith's decision was tactical. The third blip on Porter's scope wasn't another predictable Betty. Its signature was different, faster, jinking erratically. "Target is maneuvering, changing altitude and heading. Speed 190 knots, Porter reported, his voice tight with concentration. This was a Nakajima K-49 Helen, a dedicated heavy bomber with sharper performance and a lethal tailgunner. Its pilot knew the drill, weaving through the darkness to break any potential radar lock. For the first time that night, the hunter was facing wary prey. Smith felt a cold focus settle over him. This would not be a simple, stern attack. Porter's skill became paramount, predicting turns, translating the dancing green blip into actionable vectors. "He's turning right now. Come right 15 degrees, descend 200 feet. The P-61 banked smoothly, its twin-boom frame stable even in the aggressive pursuit. The gap closed. 2 miles. 1 mile. Smith saw it, a darker shadow executing a slow, deliberate weave against the cloud layer. Smith abandoned the textbook approach. A direct rear attack would place him in the kill zone of the Helen's 7.7mm tailguns. Instead, he exploited the Black Widow's power and geometry, sliding below and to the bomber's port side, a blind spot. At 600 yards, he matched its evasive turn, the G-force pressing him into his seat. Suddenly, bright tracers sliced the darkness ahead. The tailgunner had spotted them. The surprise was lost. "He's seen us," Smith hissed. He had seconds. Centering the weaving silhouette in his gun sight was like trying to pin a shadow. At 400 yards, he fired a long 3-second burst, walking his shells into the bomber's path. The effect was catastrophic. An orange flare erupted from the Helen's right engine, followed by a secondary explosion that ripped the wing open. The stricken aircraft rolled violently and spun into the abyss. "Splash 3, 0029, Porter confirmed. But there was no time for triumph. Smith's eyes darted to the fuel gauge, 28%. They were now below the safety margin. The cockpit, once a realm of cool calculation, felt claustrophobic, and Porter was already calling out the fourth and most dangerous contact, the low-flying Betty they had ignored. It was now only 12 miles from Muroc, its bombs poised over the sleeping base. They were running on fumes,
and the hardest choice was yet to come.
The kill was messy, and the cost was sobering. As the shattered Helen spiraled into the sea at 0029, Major Smith's momentary relief was erased by the stark reality on his instrument panel. Fuel, 28%. They had crossed the red line. Standard procedure screamed to return to Muroc immediately, but Lieutenant Porter's voice, strained with urgency, delivered the next imperative. Fourth contact, bearing 170, altitude 4,000, range 9 miles. It's the low one. The bomber they had bypassed. In choosing to climb after the Helen, Smith had allowed this Betty to creep within mere minutes of the airfield. He could now see the faint probing fingers of American searchlights scraping the distant sky over Muroc. The mathematics of duty overrode the mathematics of survival. Returning to base with fuel to spare while a bomber struck the field was unthinkable. "We're going for it," Smith stated flatly, pushing the Black Widow's nose down into a fuel-conserving dive toward the fourth target. This Betty was a study in fatalistic determination. It flew straight and level, a dark arrow aimed at the heart of the American operation. There were no evasive maneuvers. Its pilot was either utterly unaware or wholly committed to his final run. For Smith, this created a perverse pressure. It was a perfect, slow-moving target, but he had only one chance. His ammunition counter showed 512 rounds left, but his fuel gauge was the true constraint. At 23%, any missed pass or extended pursuit meant ditching in the Black Ocean. Porter guided him in with calm precision, their partnership now a well-oiled machine against the clock. Smith positioned the P-61 with mechanical efficiency. At 350 yards, the Betty sat perfectly in his gun sight. He fired a disciplined 2-second burst. The shells tore into the bomber's port wing root. With a terrible, silent grace, the entire wing detached, and the Betty cartwheeled into the water at 0035. 4 kills. The immediate threat was neutralized. But as Smith banked wearily toward home, a new chilling vector came from Porter. A fast-moving contact was heading north, directly across their path to safety. It wasn't a bomber. The blip's speed and signature were different. The night had saved its most deadly surprise for last. At 042, home was a mere 12 miles away, a 6-minute flight at cruise. The battered P-61, its fuel tanks hovering at a perilous 19%, was pointed toward the dim promise of Muroc's runway lights. Then, Porter's voice cut through the heavy silence, not with alarm, but with the sterile tone of a man reporting hard facts. "New contact, bearing 300, range 4 miles, altitude 7,000. It's between us and the field." Smith's jaw tightened. The contact was heading north, toward the base they had just bled to protect. His mind performed the brutal calculus in a flash. Intercepting this new threat would burn his remaining fuel below any safe minimum, risking a fatal ditching. But letting it pass meant a Japanese aircraft, bomber or fighter, would have a free run over the vulnerable airfield. The 4 kills, the entire harrowing night, would be rendered meaningless if this one got through. Without a word, his hands acted. He banked the Black Widow away from salvation and toward the unknown blip, the decision settling in his gut like a stone. Closing at a combined speed of over 500 miles an hour, the contact resolved on Porter's scope not as a lumbering bomber, but as a small, fast return. Profile suggests single-engine aircraft, speed is high. Then, at 800 yards, Smith saw it, the sleek silhouette of a Nakajima K-84 Frank, one of the deadliest Japanese fighters of the war. In daylight, it could outrun and outmaneuver his heavy P-61,
But now it was a blind predator, its pilot peering uselessly into the abyss. Smith's advantage was seconds of surprise and his radar. He slid into the kill position, the Frank's cockpit glowing faintly from its instruments. At 300 yards, his fuel gauge screamed at 17%. One burst. He fired a long 3-second torrent of 20-millimeter shells. The Frank's engine disintegrated in a spectacular flash, and a moment later, a white parachute bloomed in the darkness, a rare sight in the Pacific Night War. The victory was instant, historic. 5 kills in one night. But as Smith turned back toward Muroc, the true victory felt hollow. The fuel gauge read 15%. The runway lights were visible now, tiny yellow specks in the distance. Then, as if the night demanded one final sacrifice, they vanished, swallowed by the darkness. Smith was 3 miles out at 800 feet with no visual reference and a tank running nearly on fumes.
The runway lights had vanished, plunging Smith's world into a black void. At 800 feet and 3 miles out, his only tether to Earth was the faint green glow of his radar altimeter and Porter's voice navigating from the rear compartment. Coastline ahead, field 1 mile inland, begin descent to 500 feet. With 9% fuel, roughly 6 minutes of flight, there was no margin for error. Smith reduced power, extending the landing gear and flaps, feeling the Black Widow grow heavy and slow. His training took over, a cold, mechanical focus suppressing the fatigue. He flew by the numbers. Airspeed 120 knots, descent rate 300 feet per minute. The radar altimeter ticked down, 400, 300, 200. Below was nothing but impenetrable darkness, hiding coral runway, construction equipment, or jungle. Smith's entire existence narrowed to the instruments and Porter's steady commentary, a lifeline in the abyss. At 100 feet, he cut power further, committing to the blind approach. The altimeter read 50, then 25. A sudden jarring impact shook the airframe, the main wheels hitting the crushed coral surface. Smith fought to keep the nose straight, braking hard as the unseen runway rushed beneath them. The P-61 shuddered to a stop. Silence, broken only by the ticking of cooling engines. They were down. At 0103, ground crewmen materialized from the darkness, their flashlights piercing the cockpit canopy. Smith shut down the engines, the sudden quiet feeling alien. Climbing out, his legs trembled not from fear, but from the intense, sustained concentration. Lieutenant Porter emerged, sharing a silent, exhausted nod. Words were superfluous. The aircraft was untouched. The night's violence had left no mark on its black skin. By 0115, intelligence officers were debriefing them. Smith reported the details with clinical precision. 4 Betty bombers, 1 Helen, 1 Frank fighter, destroyed between 2357 and 0046. The officers cross-referenced ground radar logs and Coast Watcher reports. Every claim was confirmed. 5 aerial victories in a single night, a feat unmatched in the Pacific Night Fighter Force. The arithmetic of the mission was finally complete. 0 American casualties on the ground, the airfields intact. Yet, as Smith finally rested, the war gave no reprieve. In a few hours, at 14:30 on December 30th, he and Porter would be airborne again, their Black Widow refueled and rearmed. Another contact awaited, and history was not yet finished with Major Carroll Smith. The intelligence debrief at 0115 was a stark formal affair under a naked bulb, a sharp contrast to the fluid chaos of the night sky. Smith and Porter, still in their sweat-dampened flight suits, recounted their mission with mechanical precision. Times, headings, altitudes. The confirming reports trickled in. Ground radar plots matched their vectors. Coast Watchers had seen flaming wreckage hit the sea. 5 confirmed kills in a single night. The number was historic, yet for Smith, the only metric that mattered was the 0 beside friendly casualties on the ground. The airfields were untouched. The invasion timetable held.
But the war did not stop for accolades. Mere hours later, at 14:30 on December 30th, Smith and Porter were again strapped into their P-61, now refueled and rearmed. The pattern repeated. Porter's radar found a contact, a lone, fast-moving Nakajima K-84 Frank at 12,000 feet. Smith, using the height advantage, dove from the sun's glare, his cannons tearing the fighter apart in a decisive burst. At that moment, with his 7th confirmed kill, Major Carroll C. Smith became the top-scoring American night fighter ace of World War II. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron continued its vital work from Muroc, its P-61s ultimately claiming 18 total victories. Smith's 7 accounted for over a third. Lieutenant Philip Porter was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, a testament to the critical, unseen role of the radar operator. The airfields they protected that December night enabled the Lingayen Gulf landings on January 9, 1945, precisely as planned. The P-61 Black Widow, America's first dedicated night fighter, had proven its worth in the darkest hours. After the war, Smith returned home quietly, his extraordinary night fading into archived reports. The physical evidence of his feat, the specific P-61 he flew, its nose art and kill markings, was eventually scrapped, like most of its kind. Today, only 4 complete Black Widows survive in museums. But the story remains, a testament to a crew who, in one relentless hour, defied impossible arithmetic, saved countless lives, and mastered the night.
The war moved on, but the night of December 29, 1944 became a permanent line in the ledger of history. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron continued its relentless patrols from Muroc, their Black Widows casting an invisible shield over the Philippines. On the afternoon of December 30th, proving their previous night's success was no fluke, Smith and Porter returned to the sky. Guided once more by flawless radar work, Smith intercepted another Nakajima K-84 Frank at 12,000 feet. Executing a perfect diving attack from the sun's blinding advantage, his cannons found their mark, sending the fighter spiraling into the sea for his 7th and final confirmed kill. This victory cemented Major Carroll C. Smith's status as the U.S. Army Air Force's top night fighter ace of World War II, a record that would stand unchallenged. Lieutenant Philip Porter was rightly awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, a recognition that the pilot's eyes and mind in the radar compartment were as vital as the hand on the stick. When American forces stormed ashore at Lingayen Gulf on January 9, 1945, they did so under an umbrella of air cover provided by fighters flying from the very airfields Smith and his squadron had defended. The P-61 Black Widow, a technological marvel of its time, served with distinction across every theater until its retirement. The specific aircraft Smith flew that night, along with most of its brethren, was scrapped after the war, its story nearly lost to time. Smith himself returned home to a quiet civilian life, never seeking fame. Yet the cold arithmetic of his mission remains his true monument. 5 enemy aircraft destroyed in 1 hour, 0 friendly casualties on the ground, and an invasion timetable preserved. It is a legacy not of individual glory, but of teamwork, courage, and a decisive victory won in the deepest dark.